Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 5th of December 2023, and these are the stories that we'll be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin with this day 60 of the conflict, the war between Israel and Palestine, and of course the devastation that continues as far as Palestinians, Gaza is concerned. At the same time, the casualties also increase, whether they be those who are helping the Palestinians in need, whether they be the journalists. The number of journalists, as far as the latest report by the CPG says that 63 journalists have been killed since the 7th of October. Israeli Defense Minister also says the attack on Gaza South will surpass the northern operation, despite American pressure advising against it. So of course we all know the intentions of what Israel is moving forward with. The opposition leader in Israel has also at the same time called for the Prime Minister Netanyahu's resignation. His trial has also begun, but what will happen? Will there be any consequences as far as that is concerned? Full assault on Palestine has started again as far as the Israeli side is concerned, and of course the number of casualties are also increasing with every passing day. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story today concerns the COP28, this 28th conference of the parties that opened in Dubai. Pakistan's contribution was of course extremely significant, whether it be in the operationalization of the loss and damage fund, whether it be at all the different green funds that Pakistan took part in and of course projected. It has been extremely important. Now that the Pakistani delegation is back, there are of course other developments that are also happening. Money pledges have stacked up at COP28. The UAE has also pledged to mobilize 270 billion US dollars in green finance by 2030 through its banks, although at the same time the world might cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming threshold in 7 years. This has been confirmed by an international consortium of scientists. An opening ceremony was also held for Energy Day at the COP28 for discussions on energy and industry. At the same time, a lot of other developments are also occurring, which we'll be highlighting during the course of this segment. Then we'll be talking about US Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner, who is leading a US delegation to New Delhi to see progress of the formation of an investigative panel to probe a plot to assassinate a 6 separate police leader on it. So we all know about that. We all know the attempt that was made by India, and that follows another attempt, and of course a successful attempt at that as far as Mr. Niger in Canada is concerned. The White House says that Feiner acknowledged India's establishment of a committee of inquiry, but whether that committee of inquiry will succeed in doing something is another question altogether. Finally, today is the martyrdom anniversary of Major Akram Shahid. Pakistan's top military leadership commemorated the 52nd martyrdom anniversary of Major Muhammad Akram Shahid. Nishan-e-Hai, the recipient, and of course expressing profound respect for his sacrifice in the defense of the motherland in the 1971 war. And it is because of the valiant fighters like Major Akram Shahid that we are where we are, in a country where we can breathe on our own, where we can call our own. It is because of the sacrifices rendered by those on the first line of defense. This is the lineup for today. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns Israel, Gaza, day 60, the atrocities, the attacks that have begun again from the Israeli side. And as far as the Israeli side is concerned, there seems to be no letdown this time, despite the pressures by important countries, including the United States of America. Ahsan, Hamid, Durrani, Director Policy Research Center, joins us in the studios. Ahsan, thank you very much to have joined us. Ahsan, today is the 60th day of this conflict that began on the 7th of October. But despite a truce that kind of waned down some of the atrocities or the violence, now since the truce has ended, we are anew in the same zone where Israel has no intention to let go of the atrocity. What are you looking at as far as this conflict is concerned?
Omar, thank you so much for having me. I think the Israeli mindset is very clear. The temporary truce is over, and now they have launched a full-scale invasion of the Gaza Strip. Now they have launched aggression in the south of Gaza also, and as well as in the Khan Yunis district, which is the second actually largest city of Gaza. And we have seen that they are pushing the residents of Gaza, the Palestinians, towards the outer edge of the city, which they have called the humanitarian zone. I think the intention is pretty clear. They want to completely take control of the Gaza. This has been an intention all throughout. But I think with these recent actions, the intention has been pretty clear.
All right. Also, I'd like to refer to what a UNICEF spokesperson says. He says safe zones in Gaza are not scientific, they are not rational, they are not possible. When a United Nations official says this, it kindly points towards the actual state of affairs of what Gaza is going through. Then who is going to help the Gazans? Who is going to help the Palestinians?
I think the safe zones, or the so-called humanitarian zones they call, it's an eyewash for the international community, for the media, as the Israelis have been doing. They have been pretty good with building a narrative. I mean, their narrative has been failing because they are doing an actual genocide in Gaza. But they have taken a good control of the media, how they have portrayed certain, you remember how they took the media, international media, to the Shifa hospital and showed around the things that they want to show. So I think this humanitarian zone is just an eyewash. It's not possible to create such a zone in a conflict area where just more than 15,000 people have been killed, and now they have launched a full-scale invasion of the Gaza Strip. So I think that this is just an eyewash. But from my perspective, I think the international community has been dead silent. The hue and cry that has been created, I think it's just for the sake of creating a noise, but I don't see any concrete actions on part of the international community, especially the United States, which holds immense power over Israel and which has been the sponsor of Israeli military. They have been pouring in billions of dollars annually, and just during this course of war, they have poured in more than 1.5 billion US dollar. They have provided additional equipment or weapons, such as the bunker busters they have recently provided to the Israeli defense forces. So I think from US perspective, I think there has been a lack of leadership, I would say, in containing this conflict. Now there are voices within the US Congress as well, and they are saying that the time should be up for Israel in terms of doing this violence or aggression against Israelis. But by and large, I think the administration of Biden, the policy of Biden administration is pretty clear. It has given a free hand to Israel to do whatever it wished to do, and that is to take complete control of the Gaza Strip.
All right, Ahsan, I'd like to also remind our viewers that this is a humanitarian crisis, if not compiled with other crises as well. Look at the number of people who've been martyred, 15,900 martyrs since the 7th of October. This is a very consequent number. Not only that, just look at the number of wounded, 40,900 wounded at least, and we don't know the number of devastations that have been caused in the buildings and the houses within Gaza, in the West Bank as well. 20 hospitals remain out of service. Many have partially resumed operations after some of the fuel supplies did reach them, but there are challenges because of the bombings, because of the overcrowding, power outages and citizen displacement. Will Israel allow more aid to enter from the Rafah crossing, or is this another embargo as far as food, water, fuel, electricity and other supplies are concerned?
From the start of conflict, Israel has been very hesitant towards international aid. We have seen that there was limited aid effort during the ceasefire, but as the ceasefire has ended and the conflict has restarted, I don't see any large-scale humanitarian aid or humanitarian efforts being carried out, or Israel allowing that for that matter, and they are not even allowing international media. We have seen that the Palestinian journalists who have been covering this conflict have been systematically targeted. Their homes have been targeted. Their families have been targeted during this conflict. But I think UN agencies, especially the UN chief, has called this a genocide of the largest scale. And as you mentioned those numbers, I mean, more than 5,000 children have been...
6,000 children.
More than 6,000, and the number keeps growing every day, unfortunately, have been killed just in the span of 2 months. And more than 80% of population has been displaced. Again, this is a crisis. This is a genocide, a textbook example of a genocide, the one that our modern history has not been known to. And I think the onus lies on the world powers, the onus lies on the United Nations, especially the UN Security Council, its members, to contain this conflict unless it becomes an issue that cannot be contained or controlled or managed.
Now, as in different refugee camps are also being destroyed, quote unquote, by the Israeli side, whether it be the Jabalia refugee camp, whether it be the Nusayrat refugee camp in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. This said, the GCC or the Gulf Cooperation Council is together in Doha. Its summit has begun in Doha, where leaders of 6 countries and Turkey are going to discuss the war that is currently going on in Gaza. I'd like to quote what Qatar's Prime Minister has said as his priorities at the Doha summit. He says, our primary aim is to stop the war in Gaza. We will continue to work toward restoring the truce. Also, aid delivery into Gaza. Our efforts are underway for that. It is unacceptable to use aid to try to bring the Palestinian people in Gaza to their knees, and then there's a need to initiate a diplomatic process. Which of the organizations will prove to be the game changer as far as this current conflict is concerned? Is it going to be the United Nations? Is it going to be the GCC? Is it going to be any other organization?
Omar, historically, Israel has been immune to international condemnations, and it does not pay heed to what international community or these multilateral organizations say about them. It just do whatever it wishes to do, and as far as it has the patronage of the United States, I think GCC has been can be instrumental, but a mere statements won't suffice. I think it has to be backed by some concrete actions. For example, trade embargo with Israel. Also, cutting off possible diplomatic relations. We see that countries like Bahrain, Oman, they have diplomatic relations. Even Turkey have diplomatic relations with Israel. The Islamic community as a whole, I think, not just GCC but the OIC in itself, needs to realize that this is a watershed moment. If Israel crosses this moment and its actions goes unabated, it will
set up a precedent that will be very difficult to counter in the future.
In the future, so this is an important moment for the Islamic community as a whole. I don't have any expectations from the UN Security Council. You have to appreciate that China has been vocal about this issue, and
so has Turkey, so has Russia.
Yes, but the onus lies on OIC in itself. They have to really up their game.
All right, let's talk also about the blocking of the telecommunication services in Gaza. That is posing a major blockade as far as the humanitarian operations are concerned, because if there's a telecommunication blockade, how can you contact each other as far as knowing what you need in which hospital or in which part of Gaza. Also, because of this, there's a huge eruption of different kinds of diseases. Waterborne diseases particularly have persisted, particularly in the north of Gaza. How can we counter that? Will Israel or will countries that are getting together, for example at the GCC, do the needful so that the aid comes, the medicine comes, or the doctors are allowed to enter the different hospitals and work to help those who are in need?
Yeah, just look at the recent example of how Israelis have been, guiding the residents of the southern Gaza towards humanitarian actions, is that they have been dropping QR codes in southern Gaza. In a city where there is no internet, the telecom communications are suspended. They are sending QR codes. So how are the citizens going to access those QR codes?
Exactly.
It's just it's an eyewash. They are not serious in their efforts for humanitarian action. All they want is, and their actions are very clear. It's a genocide. I'm repeating this word because it is
ethnic cleansing, genocide, name it, whatever
cleansing.
you do, but this is what is happening actually.
Exactly. I think for organizations like OIC or for that matter GCC as well, there needs to be a very clear communication with the US and with the UN Security Council about carrying out humanitarian actions or humanitarian response in this regard. I think Egypt as a neighbor and also adjacent to the Gaza
That
Strip.
is how the aid was
yes,
heading to the
but
Rafah crossing.
I mean, there should be some arrangement, and it has been discussed. During these meetings, is to create a buffer zone in Egypt where all these refugees can move, especially children and women.
All right, now I'll stop you there because I want to ask a very pertinent question when it comes to the refugees. The whole intention of bombarding Gaza is, I feel, I like your point of view on it, to also displace the people from Gaza so that the whole Gaza can sooner or later be occupied by Israel, reconstructed and made into camps for their own Israeli settlers. Israeli occupation forces have issued evacuation orders for specific areas covering approximately 28% of what is now left of the Gaza Strip. 1.8 million people in Gaza, nearly 80% of the population, have now been displaced internally. 1.1 million IDPs are registered in 156 UN RWA facilities across Gaza. What can be done, if the people whose land is Palestine are made to be displaced to other countries? You talked about Egypt or Jordan or other friendly countries. Is this going to be the end solution or the end game as far as this current conflict is concerned?
I mean, in the short term, you have to create buffer zone. You have to move these refugees to somewhere because you cannot keep them in Gaza Strip. They have launched full-scale invasion and they have launched full-scale bombardment of Gaza. These children cannot stay in Gaza for obvious reasons. But I mean, the intention is clear. They want the whole strip to themselves. They won't let these people in. But I mean, the lesser of the two devils is to move them into Jordan or Egypt and for temporary settlements. And then when the dust settles, which eventually it will, and when the international communities come to its senses, then they can find a solution. I mean, we keep talking about two-state solution, but I think it is a far-off dream in the current scenario. But unless the international powers come to its senses and then find a solution of how to relocate these refugees back to the settlements, especially the children, the women and children who can be relocated. I mean, those who are not of fighting ages or who the Israelis think can retaliate. I mean, at least those can be for temporarily they can be located into these buffer zones.
What are the options that you see or you feel the people in Palestine have at this moment?
I think, except for resisting this occupation and using the tools such as social media, but again, there are no telecommunication services which we can say that they can voice their concerns. But I think more importantly than the people who are in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians who are living, the Palestinian diaspora who are living throughout the Arab world, who are living in the US, who are living in the Western world, I think they need to mobilize and sort of shake things down and protest on a level that they can influence policies in those countries and sort of galvanize the popular support for the Muslim diaspora that they are living in those Western capitals. They should all galvanize those. We have seen that there was a huge protest on the streets of London. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims showed up. I think the momentum needs to be continued, and that's the only option that you can sort of shake the conscience of the world.
To what extent do you feel Israel is going to move forward as far as this genocide or ethnic cleansing is concerned? Is the ultimate aim to completely cleanse Gaza of Palestinians, or is there more to it? Because we also see what is happening in the West Bank as well.
Yeah, I think what they have done in the West Bank is completely annexed it. That has been, Gaza Strip was always an irritant or a pinching point for them. This recent tensions and conflict have given them a given them a clean sheet. As such. To launch a full-scale invasion. But I think the intention is very clear. They want the whole strip to themselves. They will not rest. As you said, that only 28% of the
what is left of
Gaza is. So I mean, the goal is, and now they have launched a full-scale invasion in south of Gaza and Khan Yunis. So I think the intention is clear that they won't stop the bombardment unless they have the whole strip to themselves.
Washington urges less harm to civilians. to Israel that Israel needs to do more to reduce harm to civilians in the next phase of the Gaza war. But these statements emanating from the US, how important or not are they as far as this humanitarian crisis is concerned? I'd like a short answer.
I don't think the statements should do. I think the US should stop funding to the Israeli Defense Forces and stop providing weapons to the Israelis in order to look for or stop the civilian casualties. I think words won't do, and words are not enough in situations like these.
Thank you very much, Ahsan. Hamid, Durrani, Sub-Director, Policy Research Center, to have joined us, to have talked to us as far as this important conflict, war, genocide, ethnic cleansing is happening as far as Palestine is concerned. Of course, the 60th day of this conflict, and we don't see any signs of some light at the end of the tunnel, despite all the protests, despite all the happenings that are going on. Let's see what happens in the next days, and we can only hope and remain cautiously optimistic. But you know, the way things are going, things don't seem to move in the right direction as far as this conflict is concerned. Thank you very much, Ahsan, to have joined us. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns COP28. We all know that the conference of the parties has opened in Dubai. Our caretaker Prime Minister, Mr. Anwar al-Haqqaq, was there, and of course he also addressed this auspicious ceremony as well as other ceremonies on the sideline. And at the same time, the contribution from the Pakistani side has also been very significant. There are a lot of developments that are occurring as far as COP28, environmental pollution, climate change is concerned. To discuss that and more, Dr. Derk Bakker, who's an environmentalist, joins us online. Dr. Bakker, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Bakker, what are your expectations from COP28?
Some of the issues here clearly covered by COP28 is the finance issue, the financing of climate mitigation contribution that will be accessible to countries that are severely impacted by the effects of climate change. So that is really a key part here of COP28.
All right, Dr. Bakker, you know, COP28 is happening in a backdrop of floods, of wildfires, of tornadoes happening across the world. Pledges have been made as far as the loss and damage fund are concerned. The United Arab Emirates has been very forthcoming as far as you know, its contribution towards climate financing is concerned. But is that enough? Is more needed?
Well, I suppose it's never enough. The costs are so gigantic for many countries. It's way too much to be borne by one country by itself, even through increased taxes and so on. But I think as a world community, if we focus on those countries that are severely impacted by climate change, and Pakistan is certainly one of them, then I think we should be able to address those areas in those countries that are in greatest need. And I think there is a great opportunity for the developed world to take a leadership in that space, to really reach out to those countries that are severely impacted. And I think it would be or should be expected from the developed world to really make an effort to extend themselves to make finance available for countries that really need it.
Dr. Bakker, you know, you must have read the Global Carbon Budget report that was published on Tuesday, of course today, which also highlights the global CO2 emissions from fossil fuels that are going to hit a record high this year. Is there an intention by the developed countries and those who are involved in fossil fuel production and CO2 emission to either halt or reduce these emissions? There were pledges made last year in the COP27 as well. But pledges aren't enough, are they?
Well, I think you're looking at a massive system that needs to be turned around. That can only happen very slowly. I mean, if you look at the petrodollars investment on a gigantic scale, and obviously the UAE and many countries in the Middle East are very much a part of that whole equation. To see rapid change, that would be quite remarkable. And having said that, I'm quite encouraged by some of the changes that I've seen in Europe, for example, where I just happened to read an article about Portugal, where Portugal has managed to deliver renewable energies at such a scale that they did not need to. I believe that they didn't need to use any fossil fuels. I stand to be corrected there, but it was quite significant to the extent that really reached several headlines in the news, as well as the UK that I'm aware of, and many other countries in Europe, particularly, where they really focus on this renewable energy aspect. Of course, the war with Russia in the Ukraine had certainly stimulated that to a great extent, a bit like the oil crisis in 1973, when the oil tap was completely shut to Europe, and where great investment in renewable energies all of a sudden snowballed. So I think if there is a political will there, that can be really drawn out through unfortunate political circumstances. But it's really remarkable what sometimes can be achieved on a short time span. Obviously, the finance opportunities are there, and that is not for every country, but it is certainly driven by political will as well, just to make things happen.
You talk of political will, Dr. Bakker. I'd like to understand whether there is a political will to implement and to release the money under the Paris Agreement.
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
All right, I'll say you talk of political will. You've talked about it more than one time while answering my last question. Do you also feel there is a political will to implement the Paris Agreement and to release the money under the Paris Agreement to the countries that are in need?
This political will, I think, comes and goes a little bit. If you have Pakistan in mind, or perhaps a global aspect, I think it is very political. So depending on who pulls the financial strings, this political will be there or not. I can think of the situation in the USA, where under the presidentship of Donald Trump, the political will was certainly not there. And the moment that President Biden took office, I think on the second day he re-signed the Paris Agreement. So this political will is exactly what it is. It is political. So it reflects the philosophy of the people in charge. But I think at the same time, it's also driven by a popular thought or a popular movement among the people, among the democracies, and to some extent, I think that has certainly driven the political agenda in many countries. Certainly in places like Australia, where I'm from, the political will to some extent reflects the desire of the people. So if the general interest is there among the people, I think it tends to be translated in policies. To some extent, maybe it can be increased or slightly decreased, but overall, I think if the interest is there among the people, then I think you can turn things around.
Is there also the intention of the world bodies or the important countries to reduce the emissions in order to stick to the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit, as has been reiterated time and again by the IPCC? They say that the world emissions need to restrict themselves or be reduced by 43% by the year 2030 if we have to stick to the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. But are we, or will we be able to do that? There's a huge question mark around that, isn't there?
Absolutely. The intentions are there, but just looking at the sheer size of the problem, it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to actually get it done. And if you just look at the the sheer, looking at it in our own backyard. If we look at the amount of fuel consumed by the average person here in Lahore, if you envisage a situation where that's no longer the case and everyone drives some sort of electric vehicle, it is just very difficult to imagine. But over time, I think changes will happen. Certainly in other countries where the uptake of electric vehicles is quite sort of snowballing. At the same time, and I do, we talk about electric vehicles as a way to combat carbon emissions. Obviously, the emissions will occur to generate this electricity, and hopefully, if all of that is covered by renewable energies, then I think you're on a winner. But if we just generate electricity by through gas or coal at some sort of power station that then drives the electric vehicle, I think we're fooling ourselves. But I think the whole package of renewable energies with electric vehicles or electrification is not just vehicles, but what we use in the house in terms of heating, cooling, and that sort of things. I think it's quite essential that things need to happen. And I think, yeah, in many ways the desire is there to see it happen. Certainly the talk is there, but whether this, I think it will happen slowly.
Okay, but are we ready for things to happen slowly because of the way the temperatures are increasing and the way the carbon emissions are also happening, the way fossil fuels are being used? Do you feel the global stocktake report that the member countries are discussing as far as their climate action plans for 2025 is concerned will help move these countries in the right direction, or is it just another statement, another pile of documentations that will not be implemented?
Probably both. Obviously, from a government perspective, you need to come up with statements and policies, but that by itself needs to be absorbed and sort of filtered down to the common people like us. How it affects our lives and how that can be. What changes we need to make in order to make things happen, and I think a general awareness is quite essential, and I think there is a lot of things that the government can do to generate this general awareness in a positive way. I think if we look at just a few years back during COVID, the general awareness of how COVID was spreading, for example, and the measures that needed to be taken in order to protect oneself, that was solely driven by the government, and that was extremely successful. So if you envisage a campaign like that, filtering down in a practical way, I think there is an opportunity for that to happen. At the same time, obviously, when it came to COVID, the measures were quite simple. When it comes to reducing carbon emissions, the solutions are not that simple. Particularly if the alternatives are not do not exist. I mean, if we think in a situation here in Lahore where a gas supply is limited and people will need some form of fuel in order to cook and generate hot water. So you can't just turn off the gas and turn
No,
on
but you need to
something
come
else.
up with alternate mechanisms, don't you? And that needs to be implemented on a global scale. This said, you talked about COVID, Dr. Bakker. You remember during the COVID times how the world had become, despite the disease, a more environment-friendly place to live in. You had begun to see the birds, you had begun to see a blue sky in places where you had never imagined you'd ever see a blue sky. Now that we see conflicts happening in Ukraine, we see conflicts happening in for example, Palestine as well, are these conflicts not going to impact the environmental pollution and climate change? And indirectly, is disease also going to be prevalent because of climate change and environmental pollution? Is all of this interrelated?
It's certainly interrelated. Certainly, the expectation is that diseases will change according to the climate. Certain diseases might pop up in areas where previously there was no mention of any diseases. So that sort of would follow the general expectation that is out there when it comes to climate change. That's for sure.
All right. When you look at the different pledges that have been made by the Western countries, I'd like to remind what Prince Abdullah bin Salman said. He dismissed the Western donations to the new Climate Loss and Damage Fund as a small change. More needs to be done, but how can that be done if the Western or countries of the global North is not willing to do so?
Well, if the countries are not willing to do or make any changes, I think the global pressure on many countries is quite substantial. Having said that, of course, the whole political landscape is changing as well. I mean, it's not the same as it was 20 years ago. Certainly, with on a global scale, with let's say the China-America type tension, bit of Russia thrown in there. Things are changing, and I think that is to some extent also reflected in how developing countries are relating to this climate change. There is now, perhaps in a good way, if there is more choice in terms of financing by having more options available. I'm thinking West versus East. Then maybe there might be more opportunities for them to get something done. At the same time, the Western countries are obviously very large emitters of greenhouse gases, and you really need to get them on board in order to make those changes. But in my experience from particularly Europe is quite optimistic. The level of integration of climate change thinking, it's quite remarkable. I'm originally from the Netherlands, and I can see from time to time going back there, I can see the adoption of solar panels. It's quite remarkable in a country that has a climate that is not solar panel friendly. It's remarkable how many people have invested in solar, and to some extent that is all subsidized. But not just solar. It's the whole change of heat pumps and low energy type heating systems, and then whole integrated approach of heating versus energy generation. I find it quite fascinating, and I think lots of research in university is all driven by this desire to see change happening in the climate sphere. And I think that needs to happen certainly in a society of Pakistan too, where academia and politicians are really coming on board to drive this change, because the change needs to happen.
The change needs to happen, but there's another thing that needs to happen, and that is climate justice. You've seen Pakistan's example, what happened last year with the floods, and how Pakistan was grappling with that, and it made the pledges. It went to Geneva, it went to the UN. Antonio Guterres time and again talked about Pakistan. He came to Pakistan and said this was a disaster beyond expectations. He also this year in September at the UN headquarters in New York said that how the world responds to Pakistan's struggles is a litmus test for climate justice. Will we ever get climate justice, whether that includes Pakistan or other countries that are vulnerable to climate change?
Will we ever get there? Probably not. But the world is not, you could say, a just place. But I think seeing the level of destruction at the scale that is just unbelievable that happened in Sindh, I think the world has certainly in my understanding, reached out and to some extent given Pakistan a lot of responsibility to make use of the money that has been made available to the people in charge to see change happen on the ground. And I think that's a challenge that the Pakistani politicians or community will have or have to make it happen on the ground. I mean, you can have, and that applies to climate funding as well. You can have $1 trillion sitting in the bank, but at the end of the day, you need to spend it, and the spending is, of course, the big challenge. It has to be spent in such a way that changes will be brought about by the investment. But to make that happen, to spend the money in such a way that you can bring about change, that will be a big challenge. And the floods, I think, are a prime example of that. You could say the money is sitting in the bank, but how do you actually spend it in such a way that the floods will not be reoccurring, because these are great challenges, engineering challenges that need to be
There are obviously
implemented.
great challenges, Dr. Bakker, and the fact remains that the world needs to stand up to these challenges and help not only the countries that are in need of climate justice, including Pakistan, but also evolve a policy that could change the whole perspective of how things are moving along as far as greenhouse production is concerned, fossil fuel emission is concerned, and so many other things that are adding to the bad effects, the harmful effects of climate change. We need a world that is a better place to live in, and that is what COP28 should come up with solutions, and solutions in the form of implementation, not just drafts. Thank you very much, Dr. Derk Bakker, environmentalist, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important issue, that is climate change, the whole perspective of COP28 that is happening in the UAE as we speak. Let's come to our last two stories. We had highlighted about the Canadian-American national who had been targeted in the US by India, and of course the United States official statement also came in that regard. Now what is happening is that the US Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiler is leading a US delegation to New Delhi, and he's here since Monday to see progress on the formation of an investigative panel to probe a plot to assassinate this Sikh leader on the US soil. The White House has said in a statement that Feiler acknowledged India's establishment of a committee of inquiry to establish lethal plotting in the US and the importance of holding accountable anyone found responsible. The fact is that whether this will happen or not is another question altogether, but the fact is also that India is under tremendous pressure after what happened in Canada with the murder of Mr. Niger, and now what happened in the United States of America. These two incidents are linked, and these two incidents point to the fact that India wants to go for, as what they say, transnational or international terrorism or terrorist activities, as has been pointed by the death of one, killing of one, and the attempted murder of the other. We look forward to a justifiable response from the US on this side. Finally, Pakistan's top military leadership has commemorated the 52nd martyrdom anniversary of Major Muhammad Akram Shaheed Nishan-e-Haider, expressed profound respect for his sacrifice in defense of the motherland in the 1971 war. Major Muhammad Akram Shaheed, born on the 4th of April 1938 in Khalian, hailing from a family with a strong military tradition, joins the army in 1961, rises to the rank of major in 1970, and in 1971 war lays down his life for the defense of his motherland. The fact also is that we need to remember and revere all those who have sacrificed their lives or are on the front line of defense as far as Pakistan is concerned. Pakistan before anything, Pakistan security before anything, and we need to also remember that we live in a land that we call our own, thanks to the sacrifices of all these army personnel. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news story segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.